Live event streams can break down anywhere along the line. What do you see as the key touch points to focus on when building a workflow for reliability? Adam, let's start with you.
So I think when you get to reliability, it's a tricky topic because there's about 1 million places that could really break. So to me, if I have a customer or an associate that comes in and says, we're going to broadcast something live and it needs to be 100% chance it works and it's amazing, then you have to start with a little bit of science. Draw a picture and all the touch points between the point of the actual person that you're that's the subject matter, all the way to the point of the person watching it. And you're going to find that there's probably 100 touch points in there that could break. So we actually put a little chart above each one of those points, 3 points. We say, what is the cost to make this redundancy better? What is the effort level to make it better? And ultimately, we look at those and we can now see a pretty clear path of where do you put your money? Where do you put your budget and time and energy? And when you do that, you're going to find that out of those 100 breakage points, probably about 6 really become most prominent. And that's going to be where you can put your energy to help increase the reliability, rather than someone saying, hey, I need multiple encoders. We'll put the energy towards where it's going to matter the most. So that's what we normally do when we start looking at redundancy.
These are really complex systems we're building here, right? I mean, it's amazing if you try to explain to somebody who's not from our industry how complex a media workflow is, to go from all the way from live production through play out, through delivery, through OTT, and all these moving parts and variants and ladders and all these things. Like, they're like CDNs, are like, what is going on here, right? And so you need to monitor the whole thing, especially if you're like doing ad hoc building of systems, or you're setting up a live system on demand, right? Because then you have all these moving parts, and now you're just building something instantaneous, so you have to make sure all those moving parts are working. It's not something you've had running for months and you know all works. But at the same time, to your point, every point in that workflow has a different value in the workflow. Like, you know, obviously the origination and the play out part feeds everybody. So you really want to make sure that's perfect. But as you go further down that food chain, every touch point, which is going to impact the viewer, is impacting fewer and fewer viewers. So therefore, you have to also make sure that you are monitoring in a way that you're actually adjusting the cost of your monitoring to the value of the content at each point of the workflow. And that's a challenge, to get all that right, but still make sure it works everywhere. Because you can't spend the same amount of money for some edge of a CDN that affects one region that you do at the core.
It's true. I think one little bit that's critical and hopefully goes almost without saying is validating testing. It's so critical. Right? Every one of those key breakpoints, you really need to be able to hammer that, and you're going to have assumptions of how it can break, and those are the ones that you can at least test, but also try to look beyond that of what you didn't expect. And understand what your different failure scenarios are, how you're going to transition, and make sure that that is smooth. It needs to be, really worked through, that it becomes muscle memory into all the teams that this is going to affect and what's going to happen in those situations.
It's funny because there's an element to this which I would assume would be obvious, but I've found a lot of scenarios where it's not, which is when it comes close to time to deploy, don't touch anything. People forget that, and they think, oh, let's just change out this encoder at the last minute. If you're trying to reliably distribute something, touch as little as possible. And if you're going to do it 10 times, don't touch it at all. Build it once and then just leave it and reuse it 10 times. I find that a lot of people forget that golden rule of don't be changing things 2 minutes before.
Yeah, I mean, that's a great point about like being able to predictively know how your traffic's going to scale, right? So when I was at Xbox, we were doing a lot of things to scale large customer events, whether it's the E3 keynote or other Mars Moonlander or whatever it happened to be on the console that particular day. But we took a lot of pride in actually testing to failure. But when you go to an Akamai or you go to a Limelight or some other CDN provider and say, hey, I'm going to stress test my network out. Can you help support 2.5 to 3 terabits per second of traffic because I want to scale to 2.5 million concurrents? How do you tell a CDN provider that that's where you want to test to? They're going to laugh you out the door, say we can't absorb that on our network. Let's try to build a config that makes sense. But a lot of it is knowing where your traffic is going, being multi-CDN agnostic or being agnostic to a single CDN provider, but also getting feedback and telemetry from your clients. So now you can make actual intelligent traffic decisions in near real time to what your customers are actually seeing. So if you're pushing a a bit rate of 10 megabits plus, so you're doing 1080p plus video at high quality, you don't exactly own all of the edge ecosystem that you're actually deploying to. You just own kind of the video player tech, so to speak. You kind of want to get that feedback so you can say, hey, this CDN provider in this particular world is not doing so well, and this is the CDN provider we need to start shedding traffic to. You have to build those kind of telemetry systems into the actual base of the application, because you can't, like an encoder, you can't just flip it off and flip it back on the fly during a live event. You have to be able to ebb and flow your traffic across, the global internet and be able to do it seamlessly. So there's a real art to figuring out both the telemetry coming in from the outside, but also how the customers are experiencing the event. Because if the first couple minutes of the event is completely like macro blocked and rebuffering and everything else, they're going to tune out and they're going to go to your competitors. Your stream is dead. Your business has basically failed for that event.